Welcome to episode number 76, the 5 non-negotiables of fat loss, a short episode with me, Marissa, today, where I just go into the 5 things that if I had to pick are the most important when it comes to losing fat in your journey. It's going to be these things. And I will give a little bit of spoiler that they are simpler than you think. And a lot of times going 0 to 100 is just not the answer. So today I'm going to break down exactly what those 5 things are and how you can apply them to your journey. As always, if you like the podcast and you want to support it, all we ask is that you share this episode with a friend, family member, or coworker who would benefit from it. One share can go a really long way and supports our mission to help as many people as possible to live a healthier, sustainable lifestyle. Finally, we would love you even more than we already do if you took the time to leave us a rating and review on iTunes. Ratings and reviews are how this podcast moves up the ranks and becomes accessible to even more people. Thanks again for listening, and we hope you enjoyed this episode, number 76, the 5 non-negotiables of fat loss. What's up, guys, and welcome back to the Barbell Lifestyle Podcast. Today, we have another short episode that I have for you guys, and today I'm going to be going over the 5 non-negotiables of fat loss. So basically, how I came up with these was when I was putting together our work from home women's fat loss formula, which is what we specialize in at my coaching company. I was basically just trying to narrow down what are the most important things that if I focus on nothing else with a client, that they will see results, they will see progress, because that's what matters, right? Is simplifying things down and watering things down to the most tangible thing that you possibly can so that it becomes easy, it becomes simplified. And that's how, I will say, that's how fad diets kind of work, right? Like, people enjoy the concept of fad diets or quick fixes because they operate on very distinct rules, non-negotiables in a sense. And so basically what I tried to do with this, because fat loss is so incredibly nuanced, it's so individual, it's so context dependent, that it's really, really hard to whittle something down into just a black and white, it's this or it's that rule, right? So instead of trying to put rules to fat loss, meaning, oh, you just need to eat these macros and you're good, or you just need to do X, Y, and Z and avoid X, Y, and Z and you will lose fat, right? Like, that's how most diets operate. Avoid carbs, eat high fat, high protein, you'll lose weight, or avoid all processed foods and you'll lose weight. But that's how people get stuck. That's how people get stuck in the yo-yo cycle of, they follow these rules, they see some success, but because those rules are not sustainable, that they are not able to then continue on with that lifestyle beyond the journey of just their fat loss, right? So what I tried to do was I tried to take all of the knowledge that I have from working with hundreds and hundreds and potentially thousands of clients at this point of their journeys, how I've coached all of those people, and I've tried to narrow it down to the 5 things that I think that if you focused on nothing else but these 5 things, that you would make a lot of progress, and it would at least simplify things down to where it is digestible information rather than here's a whole bunch of science that no one has the time to learn. So without further ado, let's get into the 5 non-negotiables of fat loss. So non-negotiable number 1 is creating a calorie deficit via habits and mindfulness. And if you go back to the episode that I did with my fiance, Aaron, you will see that we go through this pyramid. We try to paint the picture, since obviously this is an audio platform. We try to paint the picture of this pyramid that we've created that kind of walks you through what that looks like. But the bottom of the pyramid and the base of everyone's journey is habits and mindfulness. And if you think about the people that are the most successful with their fat loss, their fitness journeys long term, the ones that say, I can eat intuitively and not track my food, and I maintain my weight and I stay healthy. The people that can do that don't just do that because they calculate macros in their brain. They don't just do that because they're special and they're magical and they have it all figured out. They do that because they have cultivated the habits, the automatic habits that kind of just carry them through their day, and they've developed the skill of having those habits, as well as the skill of mindfulness. Now, I'm very particular when I use the word skill, because a skill is something that you have to work at. It's something you have to build, and it's not something that comes naturally to you. So a lot of times, people say, well, I'm not mindful. I just kind of float throughout my day or whatnot. That's not something that you can't control. It's a skill that you can build. It's something you can get better at. Habits are something that you can build, and they take time, but they are something that you are able to control. So creating a calorie deficit through those habits and that mindfulness. Now, it may not always happen exactly this way, but it will just put you in a better position where you feel better, you have better energy, and just your overall quality of life is better through these habits and through mindfulness, regardless of whether or not you physically lose weight right off the bat. But typically, these habits, when you implement them, do result in some body fat loss and overall health benefits because of what the habits do for your body. So these habits include exercising regularly in a way that you enjoy. Now, notice how here I didn't say pumping iron for the habit, right? Like, obviously strength training is something that we'll get to in this conversation, but exercising regularly in a way that you enjoy can be walking. It can be going on a bike ride. It could be playing your favorite recreational sport. At the end of the day, something that is going to keep you in shape does not have to be lifting weights like a bodybuilder or a power lifter. And a lot of people mistake it as like, oh, I can't get started because I don't like lifting weights. Like, no, like you can still make a heck of a lot of progress without resistance training. You will have a certain ceiling, a certain cap, depending on what you want out of your journey. But a lot of people never even get there, or don't even want to explore that, right? And that's okay, right? As long as you are doing physical activity. Obviously, the ACSM recommendations for physical activity are 150 minutes per week. But if you're just getting started, we honestly tend to recommend people just move for like 10 to 15 extra minutes a day in any way that you enjoy. It can be anything. It can be a walk outside after a meal. It could be a stretch after a long day of work, whatever. It's going to get your blood flowing. It's going to get your metabolism firing. The next habit I would suggest with mindfulness is just paying attention to what you're eating through some method of data collection. Now, obviously, the most quantitative method of data collection is tracking your food and starting to see what's in it. And that there is a very particular process for this that I love to go over with people, and how we do for our clients and how Christina does as well. But at the end of the day, paying attention. A lot of times we, again, just kind of float through reality. We don't even think about like what we're putting into our bodies. We're not even thinking about it. But if we start to just look at the labels, understand what's in our food, understand what we're putting in our body, we will gain so much perspective on potentially what we could change, potentially what could be improved upon, just by kind of being more mindful, being more understanding of what is actually going on, what's going into your body. And with that comes from that simple intuitive nutrition swaps. So, I'm not going to say anything specific here in terms of like switch the low fat cheese for the fat free cheese or whatever, but just intuitive stuff, like asking for the sauce on the side, asking for a side salad instead of a whole side of fries, asking for diet soda rather than regular. All of these nutrition swaps are simple, intuitive, and they cut back on, you guessed it, total calories. Drinking enough water daily is a really big one. I would just recommend starting with like half your body weight in ounces and work your way up from there as you become more active. But, the more you sweat, the more water you lose out of your body. So if you are active in the heat, anything like that every day, or you work maybe a manual labor job, then I would say maybe try to get more than that, or you might already be drinking that much. But for those who are very sedentary and don't drink any water and just sit at their desk and drink coffee all day, cough, cough, myself sometimes, just start with half your body weight in ounces and work up from there. If you are very active, you sweat a lot, a gallon a day is a good rule of thumb, but most people can't start there. So don't try to start there. And then other habits include stress management, sleep, and overall just mindset work is so underrated, and it is truly the foundation of your success in your journey. And an episode will be coming out in either a week or two where we talk a lot about this. That is an amazing conversation. But at the end of the day, what a lot of your success in your health and your fitness journey comes down to is how you talk to yourself, whether you're nice to yourself or you're mean to yourself when you mess up or do something that you didn't plan to, or handle a situation that you maybe didn't anticipate. If you are critical to yourself, you're more likely to fall into a cycle of self-sabotage and therefore not following through on the habits that you want to follow through on, whether that is going to bed on time or not eating the cookie, whatever it is. So those are the habits that, you can start to think about in your day-to-day that are simpler than, track your macros. Do this special training program. Like, I think that's where a lot of people think they need to start with this, but there's just so much information overload in this industry that it makes it so overwhelming. And then you're like, oh my God, like, I don't want to do any of this. It seems so complicated. So I would definitely just say, start simple with those habits and that mindfulness. And at the very end of the day, the two things that matter the most are, one, are you being mindful? Meaning, are you present in your day-to-day decisions? Do you have a voice in the moment when you are making a decision, or are you letting life pass you by? If you are letting life pass you by and you are not present in the moment when you are making decisions about your nutrition, about exercising, about anything that you do, then you will not be successful because you will let other things influence your decisions than what you want. But if you are able to be mindful and you're able to be present, you'll be able to make those decisions in line with what your values are and what you want, ultimately leading you to success. And then that is mindfulness. And then how you speak to yourself is the second thing at the bottom of that, is just how do we learn to give ourselves grace? How do we learn to be less self-critical? And those two things together can be the foundation for amazing lifestyle changes and, most importantly, lasting changes on how to lose fat. So if I had to sum up non-negotiable number one, I would say mindfulness and how you speak to yourself, and just the habits that kind of arise from that, in a sense. But since we're 10 minutes in and we've only gone through number one, I don't want this episode to be an hour long, so we will skip right along to non-negotiable number two, which is protein intake and food quality. So basically, this is protein, fruits, vegetables, right? So basically, this is about setting a protein target, whether that's number of servings per day, number of grams per day, whatever it is, and just paying better attention to food quality, right? You can make a lot of changes and feel a lot healthier just making some simple swaps with yourself, but at a certain point, nutrient density does matter. And especially for calories in, calories out, which does exist and it is valid, it is important because the more fibrous fruits, vegetables, and lean proteins that you have, the less total calories you're most likely to consume because those things are lower in calories and they keep you fuller for longer. So your overall intake for the day tends to trend downwards when you have more of those things. So we will kind of just briefly go over why more protein for fat loss is important, as well as why we eat more fruits and vegetables for fat loss. So for protein is muscle sparing, meaning that when you're in a fat loss phase, eating adequate protein helps you retain muscle as your body lets go of fat. And muscle is also energy expensive, meaning that it burns more calories per day to have more muscle than fat. So the more we keep our muscle or build our muscle, the stronger our metabolism is. And therefore, it's easier to lose fat because you have a stronger metabolism, stronger metabolic rate. So if you eat more protein, you spare more muscle. And if you spare more muscle, then your metabolism is faster. Rather than the alternative of this is crash dieting, where you kind of just starve yourself and you lose a bunch of muscle. That's how people end up in the yo-yo cycle. Now, protein also allows us to recover quicker from our workouts, so we're not perpetually sore from workout to workout. And it's also very satiating, meaning it keeps us full in between meals and it keeps our cravings down. So if we eat enough protein throughout the day, even if we're eating lower calories, we're not going to be craving sweets and snacks and all that stuff as much with a higher protein intake because we'll be kept full between meals. Now, we also eat more fruits and vegetables for fat loss because, one, it makes being in a calorie deficit feel easier. Like I said earlier, they have a lot of water content, they have a lot of fiber, and therefore they're less calories per unit of volume. So this allows you to fill up your stomach and feel full without consuming a ton of calories. They also include a lot of micronutrients. So those are things like your vitamins and your minerals that are essential to your health. Well, maybe not essential, but essential enough. And this improves our energy, our focus, our sleep, your overall body's function in small ways that really, really add up quickly. So a lot of your energy and your performance in the gym could actually be determined by the micronutrient quality of your foods. So if you are someone who maybe you are eating lower calories and maybe you're kind of seeing results, but not really, and you're really sluggish getting yourself to the gym or getting yourself moving for your workouts, something I would encourage you to look at is your food quality and the number of fruits and vegetables that you eat, because your energy could be suffering and therefore impacting your performance, therefore impacting your output in terms of calories out. So even though your calories in are low, your calories out aren't high enough. And so maybe having more micronutrient dense meals and food throughout the day could help with just overall better energy, better performance, therefore higher output, therefore more fat loss. Finally, we eat fruits and vegetables for fat loss because they add texture and flavor and variety to our food that we don't otherwise have if everything we eat is brown mush. And even if you don't care about the health part, eating more protein, fruits, and vegetables will just make your fat loss phase feel easier. Even if you hate the taste of fruits and vegetables, it's hard enough to be in a calorie deficit and be hungry, but, when you're working from home, the kitchen's down the hall, but the benefits here strongly outweigh the downside. Now, the next non-negotiable is for fat loss. And remember, we're talking about fat loss, not weight loss. We're talking about fat loss, specifically losing that. Strength training is going to be non-negotiable number 3. This is the overarching term for anything that provides a progressive stimulus over time. So don't worry that I say strength training, don't freak out and be like, oh my God, I have to lift like a bodybuilder. No, you could use weights. You could also use resistance bands. You could use your body weight. You could use, in good old 2020 fashion, water jugs or heavy objects in your home, right? And it doesn't need to be an hour and a half or 2 hours in the gym. It really, to see results, 30 minutes, sometimes even 20 minutes at a time can be very effective. But typically I will say, like, if you're going to dedicate some time to it, maybe 30, 40 minutes at a time. But if you need to speed it up, you can do it in shorter intervals. You eventually, even if you start with maybe, resistance bands or light weights or something, that'll be enough to start. But eventually, as you get stronger, you may outgrow those weights and it may hold you back from making more progress. But essentially, you want to do 6 basic movement patterns: push, pull, squat, hip hinge, lunge, and carry. So an example of a push is a bench press or a shoulder press. A pull is like a pull up or a pull down. A squat, I hope I don't have to explain that one. A hip hinge is like a hip thrust or a Romanian deadlift or any kind of deadlift. A lunge is like a split squat. So one foot is out in front, one is behind, and you're squatting down. And a carry would be like carrying anything heavy, carrying groceries up the stairs, whatever it is. But my recommendation with this is you don't have to do this every day. You can strength train 2 to 3 times a week, full body workouts, 20 to 40 minutes at a time. And it can be super, super effective, and it'll help you drastically with dropping fat rather than weight, rather than just losing muscle or losing water or losing anything else besides body fat. This will actually help you to tone up, tighten up, and lose specifically body fat rather than just wondering if you are lowering your body fat percentage or not. Now, non-negotiable number 4 is if you do have a specific goal, say a certain exact number of pounds, say, a certain percentage of body fat loss you're looking to get to. Non-negotiable number 4 is you have to have a specific approach if you do have something specific and measurable that you're trying to reach like that. So this is where we talk about macros and tracking our food or calories and all of that stuff, right? And I do want to be totally clear before we get into this is that you can make a ton of progress without any of that. You can make a ton of progress, improve your body composition, improve your relationship with self and your routines and your habits without touching macros. A lot of coaches make it seem like you can't do that, but I promise you, you can. Basic nutrition habits, regular movement, and strength training a couple times a week are the bare bones to a healthy lifestyle. That's all you need to live a healthier and sustainable life and see changes in your health for the long term. But there are people that have specific fat loss goals, and we've talked about the difference between fat loss and weight loss here. But to achieve fat loss, typically what we need to do is track something a little bit more diligently. So that might be your macros. So your macros are your carbs, your proteins, and your fats. Those are tracked in grams, and you have specific targets throughout the day that you hit basically by kind of playing Tetris with those numbers with the food that you eat. Another approach could be tracking calories and protein, so the number of total calories you eat in a day, because your 3 macronutrients add up to those calories. But then you also just track one of the 3 macronutrients, specifically protein, to make sure you're hitting that minimum. You can also use like any sort of like hybrid approach of all of that. But the general gist of it is that if you want to ensure reliable fat loss, we need to ensure that we know what's going into our body. And the best way to do that is to take a specific measurable approach. Now, you can, and like I've talked about, you can make progress without, those numbers and that measurement, but it's just less certain. That's the only thing I will say. It's just less certain in that you won't know 100% for sure, because if you are kind of guessing or you're just having X, Y, and Z, you have to find a way to measure it, right? And it doesn't necessarily always have to be macros. It could be serving sizes, portions, whatever. But at the end of the day, you can't manage what you don't measure. My advice is to not try to achieve fat loss intuitively or mindfully. Track something if you have a specific goal, get to that goal, and then wean off to a habit-based approach without numbers after the fat loss has been achieved and you've proven to yourself that you can maintain that. That's the journey that we take most of our clients through, Christina and I both. All right, so non-negotiable number 5 is consistency. So that's it. And you're probably sick of hearing it, but at the end of the day, no matter how well you do all these things that I've listed, if you can't do them for life, then you're not going to be able to sustain the results. Eventually the results will creep back and you will fall off, because if it's not permanent, if it's not something you can sustain while you do it, then why are you doing it in the first place? Because it's not going to keep you where you want to be in the long term if you can't keep doing it. So the reason why these things that I've listed, these 4 non-negotiables up to this point, have been so simple and like almost maybe too simple, where like you're listening to this and you're like, I thought I was getting a big math equation today. Like, in all honesty, what you really need to do is do the bare bones, the basics, the very, very bottom tier of things very, very consistently, meaning 80, 90%. And just making sure that you can continue doing that for months and months and months and years and years and years on end. Once you find out, what that baseline of consistency is that you can do, get good at that and build from there. Stop jumping into things 150% or not at all. And if you can't slow yourself down, then it might be the time to ask for help from a professional who can be that conscience and that voice for you. So if you are somebody who is falling off every single week, or you're being consistent for 30, 60, 90 days even and falling off, this is your sign to take a step back and look at these 5 non-negotiables and really work on those first and see if that can help you rather than trying to go 0 to 100 all the time. So hopefully you guys liked this podcast episode, these 5 non-negotiables of fat loss. If you are interested in learning more about what I've talked about today, I pulled all of this dialogue from a guide that we have called the Work From Home Women's Fat Loss Formula that I've made for you guys for free. So if you would like that, you can feel free to reach out to me or the podcast Instagram page. All of the information will be in the show notes. And actually we'll include the link for you to download the free guide in the show notes as well. Just so you can get it directly. But it's a 20+ page guide that walks you through exactly how to do everything that I've talked about here in these 5 non-negotiables, and then also sustain that fat loss in the long term with mindful eating strategies. So if you'd like to download it, go ahead, and hopefully we can help you, continue on your fat loss journey and your fitness journey for free and sustain it for good. So hopefully you guys like this episode. Feel free to follow me at Marissa Roy Fitness. Follow Christina, who couldn't be here today, at Christy Lynn Fit. Our info is in the description. As always, if you like the podcast, make sure to leave a rating and review. It does help us out, and that's our only ask since this podcast is completely free with no ads. And we hope to see you back next week. Thank you so much for listening to the Barbell Lifestyle Podcast, and we hope you enjoyed this episode and learned something from it. Please remember that Christina and I are not medical professionals, so if you're going to make any changes to your exercise or nutrition routines, please consult with your doctor or medical team first. Finally, we would love you even more than we already do if you took the time to leave us a rating and review on iTunes. Ratings and reviews are how this podcast moves up the ranks and becomes accessible to even more people. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next Tuesday here at the Barbell Lifestyle Podcast.